Hello, this is an assessment of a Bechstein Model A grand piano that's 185 centimetres long, about 6'1" I think, made in 1913, and looking at it to see what might improve it, and it's quite interesting to try and decide on this one. It's a good piano, certainly. We bought and sold a similar one that was in the Oxford Union, Model B actually, but similar looking. This is often described as Sheraton with the negate leg style here for Bechsteins, and looking at the case, it's been faded round that side a bit, I think probably where it's been exposed to the light. It's going around the whole piano. On the other side too, slightly faded, but the veneer's good, and looking at the top, if we lift this up, we're probably going to see a line there where you can see the difference there. This is obviously original polish, and but it's reasonable, and in this case I don't think the client particularly wants it to be repolished. We could certainly try and make it a little bit better if it was in the workshop while we were working on it. Some scratching here. I'm not really sure whether this is an original music desk. 1913, I'd have expected it to be kind of like sunburst style, but it's very integral though, so I'm a bit doubtful there as to whether perhaps it was an original plain desk. If you're in the trade and can help me there, that'd be very helpful. But we have assessed many Bechsteins. This age of Bechstein is not quite so common as the older ones, which have single legs, and then they do have a fretted desk. This Model A as Model A's have 85 notes. It's not a problem if you want to study normally. 88 notes is not necessary for most exams, as we've mentioned before. Now, looking at the key tops here, they're extremely good condition. They're ivory key tops. They could do with buffing just to cause them to not attract the dirt so much, but they're not terribly bad. And there's a little slight crack line in this one, but that's very common on Bechsteins. But no chips, and nothing has come off and been stuck back on so far, which is good news. One thing I did notice straight away playing the piano, that the pedal is not stable, it's going backwards like that, and it's because there's a wing nut missing here. Let's just have a look at that. This wing nut, by the way, belongs to the cheek. We've taken that out, so that's not the wing nut that belongs there. So on this side there's a wing nut completely missing. That should be holding that in, and then the pedals would be stable. It doesn't have a backstay on this style because the stretcher holds it. You don't have a backstay at all. But you can see on the other side there is a wing nut, which should be on the other side, so it's missing. While we're under here, all Bechsteins, I think nearly all, have a number under. If you haven't got a number on the top, you can look at the number there to get the serial number. The soundboard is in extremely good condition. There's the Model A on the frame there, so it's a Model B for the longer one. B's a bit more common for this style, I think. And there's the serial number. This is such a common problem, so I just want to explain that this number here very often is so faded out you can't read it. We think we managed to discern the number here, starting in 1,000, so 100,000, and we've written it on the assessment sheet, as you'll see later. I've no idea what that number is, because that isn't the number underneath. Then looking at the strings, I've tested the tuning pins, they're reasonably tight, so these strings are in good condition. And looking up here though, we can see there's one missing. I'm not quite sure what's happened there, because the same string's used on both pins, so you can normally wind it down, then it goes round the pin at the bottom, as mentioned many times, and then through here again, so you don't have to take the string off if it breaks. But maybe that wasn't the problem. I imagine it was though. Just looking at the rest of the piano, it hasn't got any moth, which is very encouraging. No woodworm in the piano either. So these kind of things, they're on the check sheet anyway. The soundboard, as I say, looks in good condition. Very dusty, that can obviously be improved. The frame is reasonable. Bechstein frames do tend to tarnish rather. If we were to restring the piano, which is a possibility, then we would obviously could redo the frame. The soundboards will certainly try and improve. See if any cracks do open up on it. Normally you see crack lines here very often, but there's nothing whatsoever on this one, so that's also extremely encouraging. Now the piano at this point here, this mid treble area, needs to have a good down bearing, which means the angle on the bridge. So if we listen to it here, it's a bit on the thin side. Now as the sound doesn't carry across the soundboard like I'd like it to, That's better, and that is nice and warm and rich like it should be. So this is a case for possibly dismantling it, increasing the down bearing either by bridge capping or by possibly lowering the frame slightly. Basically you want a greater angle here. It's a major problem on Bechstein particularly seem to get this problem. Bluteners don't seem to get this problem at all. We do a lot of Bluteners and they're very consistent with the tone, but round this area on Bechstein, well, there's another problem. We'll show you why the dampers are not damping off properly in a second, but that is an issue. So interesting to see the history of the piano. Sold, I presume, originally by Barnes of Oxford Street. Very, very retail many pianos, and they seem to also had Wilson Newman involved in the piano at some stage. Don't really know them. If you're familiar with them and in the trade, that would be very interesting to know. Looking at the action, it's always nice to see tuning dates. So it's just interesting, good to know the history of the piano. So it seems to have been tuned twice a year during the 1960s and 70s, right up to about 1987. And the current owner says that it's been tuned quite regularly too. And it is above concert victuals, we'll see in a minute, just above, which is good. Schwander action, very common action that we find on many pianos. Interesting enough, there's the address there in Paris, but Schwander actions, I'm not too certain of the history of them. I should check up on that one, but if you know, I'd like to put some comments underneath, that would be wonderful. And the hammers are obviously being used at some stage a reasonable amount, but I don't think they need changing, though they are a bit on the soft side, so it's always a possibility to replace hammers. And definitely the rollers, they've worn quite a bit. And the hammers are resting on the rail practically. They definitely 52 millimeters hammer blow, so that's too much really. So they'll come up to about there. And the roller, if that's changed, that'll be a bit smoother, because when the roller gets a bit worn like that, it's a good idea to change it. So that's something that can be done. Not essential to do that, but it's certainly we'd do this if it was our piano, I think. And one or two of the hinges are slightly loose here. So hammers, shanks and rollers, as we mentioned before, is a possibility. Now the reason the dampers are not working properly is a common problem on some ages of Bechsteins, that the leads oxidise. My colleague who does most of the action work thinks there's an alloy in the leads they use at certain stages, and it's quite a common problem. You can see that they've oxidised there, and some of them are touching each other. Let's have a look at which ones. So those two are touching each other, and you can see the leads actually touching inside. So they also cause the wood to crack when they expand, so we would probably replace those. We'll have to look at the keys too to see if it's got the same problem. You can see right the way through they've expanded. You can see the bass ones there, and there's one or two that are touching in the bass as well. So that's work that's definitely needing to be done. So lifting up the keys to look at the leads, we can see that there's definitely some oxidisation going on. It's not causing the keys to touch each other, but there's a problem there, as you can see. So if they're painted over like the sharps are, then it doesn't seem to cause a problem. So it's obviously useful if lead keys are painted over in some way or lacquered over. That stops them oxidising. Here's the assessment sheet. So there's quite a lot of important work to do on this piano. So I think the leads were one of the major things. Replace oxidised leads in the dampers, and with the keys also. My colleague who does most of the action work will make a decision on those, but they're not actually causing a problem at the moment. There's one wing nut missing on the stretcher, which the client has said that they can replace. Replacing the rollers, I would suggest, is a good idea, because you've got to regulate anyway, and they're a bit on the worn side. Reface the hammers is something we can do as well. So there's quite a lot of important work to do on the piano, really. It's a good instrument. The main question mark really is the down bearing seems to have been lost in the mid treble. It would certainly improve. It's not a disaster at all, it's reasonable, but it'd improve if we could restring, increase the down bearing at the same time. It won't necessarily completely restore it, but it'll certainly improve it a lot. I didn't mention earlier that it leaves lubricating on the balance rail. That's something which you can see if you lift up keys, they don't go back down. So that means the balance rail needs lubricating. We've mentioned that before anyway. So that's something which we would routinely do. And replace the missing string, which is unusual to find the string because it does go down and back up again. So all these treble strings go down and back up again, as we saw at the other end, as the two tuning pins share the same string, as it were. I've mentioned that before, but it's unnecessary to replace the string unless it's broken perhaps here, but it normally breaks near the tuning pin. An encouraging aspect of the piano is that the legroom is 62 centimeters, normally 61.5. Pedal height on Bechsteins is usually very good, so 5 centimeters instead of 7, which you get on a lot of new pianos. So plenty of legroom and low pedals, very encouraging. The weighting of the keys, which we always do last, is needing, well, it's really quite good actually. I think lubrication will bring the weight down, and I think in the bass it'll just come down a little bit. Might be even too light in the middle here, but obviously we will lubricate anyway. But that's already quite good. 151 grams. Usually we're very often finding that pianos are much too heavy when we take them on, but in this case it's fine. So that's an assessment of a Bechstein Model A grand piano, 185 centimeters long, made in 1913. And it's a very excellent instrument. The touch on Bechsteins, as we mentioned before, can be so wonderful, and it's already looking very promising. The pedal is very annoying because it's moving backwards and forwards. That's a major, very small job, but very important. Round there it's a bit thin. The bad damping is, as we mentioned, the leads and the keys. And that's also bad damping because of leads down there. Slight variety of tone there. Let's try and see if we can improve that. The hammers could be refaced anyway. I find it very inspiring to play, and it would be wonderful to work on this piano, trying to sort out the problems and improve it as much as we can. And as I say, we could restring the piano, try and improve the down bearing round here. But now I'm playing it, it's not a disaster really. The tuning pins are reasonably tight. That would be another reason for restringing, but so it can be done, and if it was our piano we would probably do it actually. Beautiful rich bass. I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got a piano that needs restoring, please do email us, info@robertspianos.com.